Hey, good morning.
Hi, how are you today?
Good. How about yourself?
Okay. So usually we have you start with introducing yourself and telling everybody who you are.
My name is Lee Camp. I am a professor of theology and ethics. I've been teaching undergraduate and graduate students for more than a quarter of a century and live in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm also the host of the podcast and public radio show called No Small Endeavor. And the tagline of that show is exploring what it means to live a good life. And so it gives us a lot of wonderful ways to think about how to live well and live a kind of life that we can look at and say that's a kind of life that's a life worth living that I'm grateful that I've gotten to live. So that's a very quick snapshot.
Nice. And how long have you guys been doing No Small Endeavor?
Well, it started as a live variety show way back in 2008, and then the public radio show and podcast started in 2000. But the way we got started was when I would do these lectures, in my ethics classes on war and peace or poverty or racial justice. I noticed that my students would come to me and they would say, "Hey, have you heard this Woody Guthrie song, or have you heard this Bob Dylan song? You heard this Switchfoot song?" And then back in then, they would even bring you like CDs with kind of playlists of songs that they thought of as listening to these lectures. And so I was just so fascinated with that. I thought, what would it be like if we started trying to do a live variety show that had one of these topics, and then we weave in music and a little bit of social critique and commentary, some comedic sketch and that sort of stuff. And so it had more of an audience than we had anticipated. And so within a short period of time, we were kind of doing a big show in Nashville every year at the Ryman Auditorium and quarterly shows and so forth. So we've continued to do the live variety show, which we're very excited about doing in Indianapolis. But then as well, it spun out the podcast and radio show, as I said, starting in the year 2000 with long format interviews.
Nice. And you said that it started in Nashville. You guys have been touring though for how many years now?
We've done shows on and off out of Nashville for years, but we've never actually done a tour, and this is our very first tour. And so Indianapolis is our second stop on our five-stop tour as we kind of experiment with this format in various places around the country.
Nice. And where are your other stops?
We're in Indianapolis, Louisville, Grand Rapids, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Columbus, Ohio.
Nice. Okay. So getting around a little there.
Yes, yeah, getting around a bit.
So somebody that's never actually caught your show or got to listen to, your podcast or anything, how would you describe to them what this event may be if they wanted to come? Because
Yeah.
you guys are going to be at Old National Center. That's a pretty big venue.
Yes, yeah, we it's going to be just a lovely night, and we're super excited about it. We have Malcolm Gladwell that I think you'll also be talking to, who's kind of one of America's best storytellers and New York Times bestselling author many, many times over. And so Malcolm and I will be doing some storytelling and some conversation about some of these stories that we're going to be telling. And then we'll have Drew Holcomb, a great Americana artist, as well as Ruby Amanfu and a full band from Nashville. And so it will be a kind of a classic variety show where we have a lot of different parts and pieces, but it'll be woven into a coherent whole as we tell stories and we think about, how do you think about your own sort of living well in the cultural context in which we find ourselves. And so we always want it to be an evening in which you're highly entertained, but at the same time, you walk away with some questions maybe that you didn't have before and some considerations about how you might live life better in a more fruitful, redemptive way in the world. And so that's always the hope that you walk away challenged, entertained, and encouraged to take seriously your own life and the contribution you can make to your community.
Nice. And referencing your lineup of your panel, um, are those hand selected by you? What brought this particular group of people together to do this?
Yeah, all of the folks that we're bringing have been on our live shows before, and so we just when we started dreaming about what might it be fun to do on the road and experiment with this, we hand selected these folks and asked them if they would join us, and they all said yes. And so we're super pleased that we got yeses from everybody we asked. So it's delightful.
Nice. What do you see in the future for your show or for your podcast or for just everything that you're doing?
Yeah, we've been for a academic kind of egghead type like me, any of this kind of stuff is just remarkable that I've gotten to do, and it feels like I'm often outside my depth, but I get to keep working with these fascinating people, and so we keep hoping that as we've seen our podcast and public radio show continue to grow, we want it to continue to be known around the country and spread around the country. We're currently in syndication with PRX, and so we are, I think, 40 plus stations around the country. But we'd love to be around all over everywhere in the country because we do think that we're talking about things that don't get talked about much in public media, and coming at them at an angle where in a world that is so polarized, we're trying to take serious substantive social questions and try to talk about them in a hospitable way where we allow people space to say the things that are true to them and try to find some sort of way to facilitate our common civil discourse that actually does some constructive good rather than just further deepens the hostilities that seem to be so prevalent.
Sure. And I think that in today's climate, that is more important than ever.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you want people to know most about you guys? Because I know that we're like getting close on, yeah. We're,
I would want folks to know that, like I said, that we're going to be bringing some top-notch um, entertainment and top-notch musical. Uh, let me redo that one. I would want people, first of all, just to know that we're working hard at bringing you something that we think is going to be super compelling and really fascinating. And it's different. One of the challenges that we faced is trying to explain what is this thing. And I think for those who are perhaps in my generation or a little older, you can think back to about some of the variety shows that used to be more prevalent in public media than perhaps they are today. But we're calling upon that kind of variety show approach, but to do so with a sort of social, intellectual, moral purpose. And that is let that sort of beautiful, multifaceted way of communicating something bring us questions that are really worth grappling with and that are crucial for us to be grappling with in the time in which we find ourselves.
what do you think are some of the most challenging subjects that you've covered?
Oh wow! Oh, we have one of the things that I have discovered in my work as an academic in the field of ethics is that in the last several hundred years, the way people generally talk about ethics is that they think, well, if I take an ethics class, for example, I'm going to come up with some sort of list of rights and wrongs, do's and don'ts. And there's, of course, there's always a place for some helpful things about rules of thumb about rights and wrongs, do's and don'ts. But the more interesting way that the philosophers thought about ethics many centuries earlier was starting with the question of what kind of life is a life worth living? And when you think about life as this this grand adventure that you have, and you've just got this one shot at it, right?
Sure.
What kind of life then is one that you want to give your life to? And so that classically is what the ethicists did, and the moral philosophers did. And so we try to take that sort of approach. And so that's obviously a very multifaceted question. It pertains to very personal habits and dispositions, things like courage, things like bravery, things like persistence, things like resilience. And so we do a lot of kind of work on that sort of stuff. But it also raises questions about what do we mean by something like justice, right? Aristotle used to say, because we are social creatures, you can't have a flourishing life if you don't pay attention to questions of justice. And so we have a lot of questions about, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does it mean to give justice, to observe justice, to pay justice? And so we're grappling with very personal, intimate questions of what does it mean for me to cultivate the kind of human being that I want to be as an individual, but also looking at some of the pressing issues of our own day. So, for example, a lot of times we'll kind of combine those two, the personal and the social, by looking at key exemplars. So, for example, a couple of years ago, I got to go out to California and interview Reverend James Lawson. And Reverend Lawson was one of the leaders of the American Civil Rights Movement and actually was the architect of nonviolence in the Civil Rights Movement. And when you look at a story like somebody like that, here's somebody who's very engaged with the social questions of his day, and yet he had a very personal journey himself because he had to decide as a college student will I stand up for what I believe is just and true and literally get sentenced to 3 years in federal prison as a junior in college, and then go on to be this sort of remarkable leader of nonviolence in the civil rights movement? So there's these exemplars who are, as we tell their stories, we hope that other people will catch a glimpse of that and get caught up themselves in some sort of grand drama of living a sort of life that's a life worth living.
Sure. So everybody that wants to come out and see you here in Indy can see you at Old National Center. Yeah.
Yes, they can see us at the Old National Center on April 10, and we would be delighted to have everybody come out and join us. You can find out more on our website at nosendeavor.com/events. But thanks so much, Amanda. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate the invitation to be on your show.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. And I look forward to seeing you when you come to Indy.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. So typically, I start by having you introduce yourself for the people that are going to be listening.
My name is Malcolm Gladwell. I am a writer, podcaster, host of Revisionist History, and a delighted participant in no small endeavor.
Exciting. So, how did you come to be part of this podcast with, or the show with No Small Endeavor?
Well, I did. Lee had invited me to do the show in Nashville, I think maybe a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And I had a lot of fun. And uh, and I met Lee. I did Lee's podcast, and we stayed in touch. And then he said, would I be interested in doing something more ambitious? And I said, sure. So here I am. It was as
That's
simple as
exciting.
that.
So the idea of like living the good life, that kind of motto, that really appealed to you.
Yeah, I just think I find Lee a very impressive guy. And I thought the show in Nashville was, it was this kind of, it was really an incredible evening. I mean, it was beautifully produced. It was funny. It was warm. It was smart. It had great music, an enthusiastic crowd. I'd never been to anything like that before. And the idea of being a part of it was really exciting.
That's amazing. And coming from your background, I was looking, you kind of have, you focus a little like sociology and psychology. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a journalist, and I talk about all kinds of things, but I have interest in those fields and others. I range pretty widely. Pretty much a generalist.
Didn't you live in Indiana at one point in your journalism career?
Yes, I did. I lived in Bloomington for 6 months.
Nice.
My first 6 months after college. And I had a great time. I fell in love with Indiana at the time. Yeah, I realize Indianapolis is not Bloomington. The difference between southern Indiana and central part of the state, but I'm quite sure I will enjoy myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and I think something that Indianapolis and Bloomington and a few other places in Indy have in common are that cultural pull that they're interested in music and the arts and just things to further advance where we are as people. So that's kind of cool. You'll see a lot of similarities. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah,
Did you leave from Indiana to New York?
to Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
10 years
And
in Washington, D.C. before I came to New York.
and but you do write for the New Yorker now, or you did?
Not really. I mean, I used to for many years, and then now I do my podcast, Revisionist History, and I write books, and that keeps me busy enough that I don't really have time to write magazine pieces.
Sure. Where can we stream your podcast?
Anywhere podcasts are found. It's called Revisionist History. I've been doing it for probably 10 years now. We just had a big episode on Paw Patrol,
Nice.
and I have an episode coming up, a big critique of Joe Rogan. I do all kinds of fun stuff. It's a narrative podcast. It's not an interview show. I tell stories with a lot of,
Okay.
yeah.
And as far as your contributions to No Small Endeavor, what can people that aren't familiar with that expect as far as your part of the show?
Well, it's a variety show, so there'll be music from Drew Holcomb and other people, and there'll be comedy, and there'll be all kinds of things. But the kind of spine of the show is me and Lee are going to be telling the story of the intersection between the abolition movement, the anti-slavery movement, and the suffragettes in the 19th century. And it's a really fascinating story that has a lot of resonance today.
Yeah, sure. I think that was something that I really respected about what he was saying earlier when we spoke about creating a place for people to kind of talk and, remove some of the, I guess, the bias of,
Mhm.
life in general and really just kind of lay things out there. Is that you think the biggest part of the appeal for someone that may not be familiar with what you guys do on the show?
Yeah, what Lee has done with this show, I think, yeah, it's been his goal all along to try and elevate the conversation and think people to focus on what the kind of components of a good life are. And I think he's done a beautiful job of that.
Sure. Yeah. If you had 1 minute to tell somebody what this is or what it is that you're doing or something that you feel like would appeal to just, the general masses, how would you describe it?
I would say we're trying to give the audience a different kind of evening out. Um, Something that's both intellectually engaging and entertaining. Um, Something that, you're not going to a concert in a loud bar or a nightclub, and you're not going to a lecture at the university. But you're taking the best elements of those two experiences and you're bringing them together. And that's a very unusual and I think really, really, really cool idea. Yeah, I think people will be challenged and satisfied on one level, and at the same time entertained. I mean, we're bringing a big country star, so it's gonna be fun. People should come, leave your mind wide open, and you'll have a good time.
Hot damn, you guys. 420 is about to be lit because we have a really cool event. Follow me to Sam's as Happy Hour presents A Very Adult and Easter, an Alice in Wonderland themed adult Easter party with games, prizes, raffles, a free Easter egg hunt. We're going to have cold beer, good friends, all the cool stuff. There's going to be some local vendors there. We're going to have some free treats sitting out. Killer Bacon is collabing with the bar to make a damn good pizza. And of course, we have a couple burlesque dancers that come on. They're going to be on from 8 to 9. It's on 420. On the patio, the TV will be showing If You Know, You Know. And we'll be out there. Sam's Silver Circle. Don't miss the party. Come on out. Have a good time. We're really excited to see you. Hosted by Cinema Scares, Sex Hair Entertainment, and of course, your friends at Nouveau Indy. See you there.